Hey guys, it's Kavin, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a little bit of a Kavin Devo. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27, if you want to follow along in your Bible. So this story is about Jesus calming a massive storm. So first what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes, and for a moment I want you to imagine that you're on a little boat. A boat big enough for maybe 12 people. You and some of your friends, as you are sailing on this very calm, beautiful sea, or a lake if you want to. And suddenly imagine that a massive thunderstorm comes and the boat starts to shake and waves start to hit the boat, and you're afraid that the boat is going to flip over on its back and you're going to get thrown into the ocean. And that is what the disciples would experience in this situation. So before this whole thing happened with the storm, Jesus was on land with some of his disciples, and he was being followed by a massive crowd of people after doing a couple of things with them. And he wanted to just take a break. He wanted to get away from the crowd just for a little bit. And so he tells the disciples to get into a boat and cross this large lake so that they could get away. And while he's on the boat, Jesus decides that he's tired, so he goes and he takes a nap. And that is where our story begins. You see, the disciples were fishermen, and they were used to sailing on the seas. They were used to sailing on these large lakes. In fact, this was what they did as a job before they were Jesus' disciples. And suddenly, it says this in verse 24 of chapter 8, it says, "Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was still asleep." You see, for the disciples to be scared of this storm, it must have been an absolutely scary storm. It had to be so scary that the disciples had no other choice but to ask Jesus for help. Because these guys, again, were fishermen. They were used to sailing on the ocean. But these waves were massive, thunder and lightning, and they were afraid that the boat would fall over. And so they go to Jesus, and the disciples in verse 25 say this: "The disciples went and they woke him up saying, 'God, save us. Lord, save us. We're going to drown.'" The disciples were scared, so they went to Jesus. Jesus at this point wakes up as his disciples wake him up, and he says this in the next verse: as the storm is swirling around the ship and lightning is striking, he says, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and he looked at the storm as it surrounded the ship, and he calmed the winds and the waves, and everything on the water was completely calm. The sun came out again, the clouds disappeared, and the disciples were safe. It says this in verse 27, it says that the disciples were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this, that even the waves and the wind obey him?" So what can we learn from Jesus and the disciples in this situation? Well, we learned that the disciples, in their moment of need, went to Jesus because they were afraid. So we can learn two things from this. One, we don't have to be afraid because Jesus is with us. Jesus protects us, and he will calm the winds and the waves in our lives. And the second thing is that when we are afraid, when we're scared, when life is difficult, we can go to Jesus to protect us from the hard things that happen in our lives. And so as I wrap up right now, I want to give you guys just two questions. My first question is that when you're afraid, when you're going through a hard time, can you turn to Jesus? Do you turn to Jesus? And the second question is, do you know how to go to Jesus? If you don't know how to go to Jesus, I encourage you to ask your parents or your pastor or a leader that you trust. Thanks, guys, for listening, and I hope to see you soon.